Due process. Introduction. Begin with a thought-provoking statement or a relevant quote about justice and fairness to capture your audience's attention. For example, imagine a world where individuals could be deprived of their rights without any warning or chance to defend themselves. This scenario, thankfully, is prevented by a fundamental concept in law known as due process. Definition of due process. Clearly define due process as the legal principle that ensures fair treatment and protection of individual rights in the judicial system. You can say, due process, at its core, guarantees that no one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without fair and lawful procedures. Historical context. Provide a brief historical context to give your audience insight into the origins of due process. Mention key milestones or historical events that shaped the development of this concept. The roots of due process trace back through centuries, evolving as societies sought to establish systems that safeguarded individuals from arbitrary and unjust actions by those in power. Importance in the legal system. Highlight the critical role of due process in maintaining a just and equitable legal system. In essence, due process acts as the bedrock of justice, ensuring that every person, regardless of their circumstances, is afforded a fair and impartial treatment under the law. Principles of due process. Notice. Begin by explaining the principle of notice. The first pillar of due process is the right to be informed. This means that individuals must be given adequate notice of the charges or legal actions against them. Imagine being accused of something without even knowing what you're being accused of. It's a fundamental violation of due process. Opportunity to be heard. Move on to the principle of having an opportunity to be heard. Having received notice, individuals are entitled to present their side of the story. This principle ensures that everyone has a fair chance to defend themselves, presenting evidence, witnesses, or arguments in a manner that allows their perspective to be considered. Impartial decision-maker. Explain the significance of an impartial decision-maker. Equally important is the requirement for an unbiased decision-maker or tribunal. This means that the judge, jury, or administrative body overseeing the case must not have a personal interest or bias that could compromise the fairness of the proceedings. The decision-maker must approach the case with an open mind, free from undue influence. Summarize principles. Recap the three key principles. To sum it up, due process revolves around notice, the opportunity to be heard, and an impartial decision-maker. These principles act as a safeguard, ensuring that legal proceedings are conducted fairly and justly, preventing arbitrary actions that could infringe upon an individual's rights. Constitutional basis. Begin by emphasizing the constitutional foundations of due process. Now that we've explored the fundamental principles of due process, let's turn our attention to its constitutional underpinnings. These principles are not mere legal ideals. They are enshrined in the very fabric of our legal systems. Fifth and 14th Amendments. Fifth Amendment. In the United States, the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution explicitly states that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. This amendment, often associated with criminal cases, ensures that individuals facing legal actions are afforded the protections of due process. 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment extends this protection to the state level, declaring that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property, without due process of law. It emphasizes the universality of due process, reinforcing its application across all levels of government. Global perspectives. Briefly mention that due process is not exclusive to the United States. Many legal systems around the world incorporate similar principles. While we've touched on the U.S. Constitution, it's essential to note that due process is a universal concept, echoed in legal systems globally, emphasizing its significance in safeguarding individual rights worldwide. Procedural versus substantive due process. Begin by introducing the distinction between procedural and substantive due process. As we delve deeper into due process, it's crucial to understand the two facets that shape its application: procedural and substantive due process. These represent different aspects of ensuring fairness and justice in the legal system. Procedural due process. Define procedural due process. Procedural due process focuses on the fairness of the procedures used in legal proceedings. It's about ensuring that the methods employed in a case, from arrest to trial, adhere to established rules and standards. Think of it as the how of justice. Substantive due process. Define substantive due process. On the other hand, substantive due process is concerned with the content or substance of laws. It questions whether the laws themselves are fair and just. In other words, it's about the what of justice, examining the fairness of the laws before they are applied. Balancing act. Highlight that both aspects work together to ensure comprehensive protection. While procedural due process safeguards the fairness of procedures, substantive due process ensures that the laws being applied are just. Together, they create a balanced framework that seeks to prevent arbitrary and unjust actions at every level of the legal system. Examples of due process in action. Start by emphasizing the real-world application of due process. To truly appreciate the significance of due process, let's examine concrete examples that highlight its implementation in various legal scenarios. These examples showcase how due process safeguards individual rights in the face of legal actions. Criminal trials. Provide an example related to criminal trials. Consider a criminal trial where an individual is accused of a serious offense. Due process ensures that the accused is informed of the charges, notice, has the opportunity to present a defense, opportunity to be heard, and faces an impartial judge and jury, impartial decision-maker. This process guarantees a fair trial, protecting the accused from arbitrary actions. Administrative hearings. Offer an example related to administrative hearings. In administrative settings, such as a disciplinary hearing at a workplace, due process ensures that an employee facing allegations is given notice of the charges, provided with an opportunity to present their side, and the hearing is overseen by an impartial decision-maker. This prevents unfair employment actions and upholds the employee's rights. Due process in education. Discuss due process in an educational context. In education, due process may come into play when a student faces disciplinary action. The student is entitled to notice of the allegations, the opportunity to explain their actions, and a fair hearing. This ensures that decisions affecting a student's education are made with fairness and consideration. Conclusion and universal application. Conclude by emphasizing the universal application of due process. These examples demonstrate that due process is not confined to a specific legal setting but is a fundamental principle applied across diverse scenarios. It acts as a safeguard, promoting justice and fairness in our daily lives. Challenges and contemporary issues. Begin by acknowledging that while due process is a foundational concept, it is not without challenges. As we explore the world of due process, it's important to recognize the challenges and contemporary issues that can impact its effective implementation. These challenges highlight the ongoing efforts needed to uphold this crucial legal principle. Technological advancements. Discuss challenges related to technology. In our rapidly advancing technological landscape, issues such as digital surveillance and artificial intelligence pose challenges to traditional notions of due process. Questions arise about how to balance the use of technology with the protection of individual rights, requiring constant adaptation within legal frameworks. Access to justice. Address concerns related to access to justice. Access to justice remains a significant contemporary issue. Economic disparities, lack of legal representation, and systemic barriers can hinder individuals from fully participating in the due process, raising questions about the universality of its application. Globalization and cross-border cases touch upon challenges in the context of globalization. In an interconnected world, cross-border cases present challenges to due process. Legal systems must grapple with harmonizing standards across jurisdictions to ensure fairness and consistency. Conclusion and call to action. Conclude by emphasizing the importance of addressing these challenges. In navigating these challenges, it becomes evident that the protection of due process requires continual vigilance and adaptation. As individuals and societies, it's our responsibility to actively engage in discussions and actions that uphold and strengthen this fundamental principle of justice. Conclusion. In this brief journey through due process, we explored its fundamental principles: notice, the opportunity to be heard, and an impartial decision-maker. We delved into its constitutional foundations, examined procedural and substantive aspects, explored real-world examples, and considered the challenges it faces in our contemporary world. Due process stands as a guardian against arbitrary actions, ensuring that individuals are treated fairly and their rights are protected. It is not just a legal concept but a cornerstone of justice that upholds the principles of a democratic society. As we conclude, let's remember that the strength of due process lies not only in its principles but in our collective commitment to upholding them. Stay informed, engage in discussions, and advocate for a legal system that safeguards the rights and dignity of every individual. Thank you for joining this exploration of due process. Your understanding and awareness contribute to the ongoing dialogue about justice in our society.